Good sticks, everyone. Welcome to the Captain Avalanche Fancast, your unofficial source for all things Colorado Avalanche hockey and more from a fan perspective. Hosted by me, Captain Avalanche Corey, and our Sharknado enthusiast, Dom. Now, we're no insiders. We're not inside the locker room face-to-face with our favorite players, but we hope to create a relatable and welcoming environment because we're just like all of you listening, fans. Fans with a deep passion for the game of hockey, and in this case, the Colorado Avalanche. Dom is back, everyone. Dom, I am so glad that you are back with us today.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here, Captain. I definitely was sad to miss out on the last episode, and my apologies to the audience that I wasn't able to be there, but I'm excited, and I think we got a good episode planned for you guys today.
We certainly do, because Dom is much smarter than me and significantly more talented at creating hockey analysis. So I'll be really excited to hear his thoughts on some things. One of my thoughts, and we can save this a little bit, jumping right into it for later when you're talking about your beloved Sharks, but just briefly, the Sharks of all teams have broken the Dallas Stars shutout streak, and frankly, I find that hilarious with a goal from Tyler Toffoli.
Oh, not only breaking the shutout streak, but actually, well, I guess with that shutout, we were the first team, or the Sharks. I'm not on the team as much as I wish I was. I will say that we, from time to time. The Sharks, actually, that goal from Tyler Toffoli was the first goal scored on Stars ice this season that was scored by a team that is not Dallas. So that was another miniature milestone that comes with breaking that streak. But yeah, absolutely. How about Tyler Toffoli doing exactly what we would hope he would do? In 3 games, already having a couple goals. This is what we paid him for. So glad to see it.
I believe they said 7 teams in the last however many years. That's pretty remarkable for a guy who feels like has always been very consistent in his career. But to me, Toffoli seems a lot like Vladdy Tarasenko. He finds a team that he's on for a little while, which is the case with the Sharks right now, but then eventually he's moved on as a rental to other teams, whether they're struggling or contenders, just I guess whoever can afford it.
Well, and we'll see, because based on the contract he was given with that 4 years, it might not be the longest contract ever, but by Shark standards, it's the longest contract and the the highest paying contract that we've given to a free agent in our franchise history. So perhaps that with that, we might be able to keep him into the rebuild. 4 years, who knows? By then, maybe Celebrini, Will Smith, all the guys will be ready to go and compete for playoffs. We could keep him around.
That would be...
Make it his final place to play.
That would be great. How old is he now?
I would still say he's on the younger side. It's not past 30 yet by any means. Let me look up for certain.
He is 32, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, he doesn't play like he's 32. He's got that speed and still has the jump in his game that, knowing he's 32, he certainly could end up playing out the rest of his career with the Sharks. Maybe get an extra extension of a year or 2 at the end if this contract goes well.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, I feel like he has to be older than 30 because he was with the Kings for those playoff runs. So, but you're exactly right. He definitely does not show his age. Dom, we have a goalie goal alert. Philip Gustafsson has scored the first goalie goal in Wild history. It is the 18th goalie goal in NHL history, and it's frankly kind of crazy that it happened so early on in the season. We're barely 2 weeks in.
Dare I say it was wild to watch, and my apologies for the dad joke. That is what I bring from time to time. But it is always an impressive feat to see a goalie goal. When we talk about statistics and how difficult some of these things are, I know a couple episodes ago when we were speaking together, we talked about how the Stanley Cup is the hardest championship trophy to win in all of professional sport. That feat of getting a goalie goal is definitely extremely rare, and I wonder what the statistics are on just how hard that is.
Well, again, this is the 18th in the entire history of the NHL, which is well over 100 years. Only 2 of them have come in the playoffs. This is the 16th regular season goalie goal. So, I mean, let's see. Well, what's crazier to me is we've had, 3 in the last 3 years? 3 or 4?
Yeah, I think the goalies are just taking their shot. I mean, why not? When we're also seeing goalies pulled earlier, more empty net opportunities. You see the net open with 2 minutes plus left, even in a one-score game. So I think that whole mentality, that shift, has increased the opportunity as well for goalie goals.
Yeah, I'm taking a look here. We've had 4 goalie goals in the last 4 years. The latest one in that was Pekarine's in 2020, but then last year alone, we had 2 with Linus Olmark and Tristan Jarry. And then obviously we already have Philip Gustafsson shooting it in the empty net. I was kind of bummed because I saw that the Wild had scored a goalie goal, and I was like, oh, please let Mark Andre have been in the net for that. Fortunately, it was not. But all the more congratulations to Philip Gustafsson. Quite a remarkable feat.
It certainly was, and I think the Wild in general have started the season very well and have outperformed my expectations, certainly, to be third or tied for second with 6 points in the East, or excuse me, in the Western Conference in the Central Division. It's a surprising place for them to be, but let's see if they can keep it going.
Indeed. So, just looking at this brief history, and we'll just take into account the NHL expanding into the United States, which happened in 1924. So literally a straight 100 years. By that, we get a goalie goal once every 5.5 years, if you take that into account. So the fact that we've gotten 3 in the last 2 years is frankly kind of insane. Speaking of goaltenders, one thing I wanted to bring up on the last episode that completely flew over my head and I spaced on was I talked about how Mikko Rantanen is in a contract year. And Dom, as you know, when a player is in a contract year, somehow if they've played well, they'll play even better. And if they've played like shit, they'll somehow play like the next Connor McDavid or Nathan McKinnon. Unfortunately, that has not been the case for Alexander Georgiev thus far, who is also in a contract year. Now, as I said with Mikko Rantanen, you can expect with the Leon Draisaitl signing that I would anticipate him to be in the 11 to $11.5 million range, maybe more. And now you have Igor Shesterkin likely resetting the goalie market with the rejection of $11 million. You have Jay Sway signing the 8.25. So looking at Georgiev right now, frankly, the implication is if he performs well, he'll get the extension. And if he continues to perform at the level that he likely is at this current moment in time, I'd say that's goodbye.
Yeah, I mean, that is something that is, as you mentioned, the contract year, it is a do or die moment, and how everyone responds to the pressure is different. You do see a lot of times those star players, those offensive guys will throw caution to the wind and they'll just go for it. They will try to score extra points. They will just put it all out there. And sometimes their defense might slip a little bit, but that's just because they're so focused on the offensive side. They might be cheating up a little bit, trying to take advantage of as many opportunities as possible. When you're a goaltender, there's nowhere to hide. You can't let part of your game suffer to compensate in another part. You're stuck between the pipes and you have to show up night in, night out and make the saves. And I'm sure for him, it certainly doesn't help to have fans in the stands booing him before much of the season has even happened. I think that was unfortunate, but the psychology of a player in that moment, we'll see if he can take that as fuel and bounce back and start to play like other players do in that contract year to try to keep himself with the Avalanche for next year.
And I hope so too. I don't ever wish ill upon him, and I'll talk about this more in a minute here. Just that I think the Avalanche are a team that's very mentally hard on themselves, and I think Georgiev, especially last year, was incredibly mentally tough on himself. So honestly, he needs to call up Nathan McKinnon's sports psychologist that he talks to, because clearly it worked for him. Because right after he hired them, he won a Stanley Cup. So hoping all the best for Georgiev. I would like to make a correction to a previous statement I made. I was close on my assertion, but I was talking about how in the Stanley Cup season for the Avalanche, they had lost like 6 of their first 9. I was close. They lost 6 of their first 10, and they lost 3 of their first 4. And after the third straight loss, they won their home opener against the Blackhawks and went on to lose 3 in a row like we have now. Gabriel Landeskog had to come out and reassure the crowd that everything is okay. It is just the start of the season, which obviously by the end of it, looking back, it really was all okay. But I'd also like to point out that in those first 10, 2 of those losses came against the Blue Jackets back to back, one at home and one in Columbus. So, as I was telling you before we started recording today, wait until we get to November to start hovering your hand around the panic button. But the Oilers lost their first 3, including to the Blackhawks. We've seen plenty of other talented teams like the Predators going down. That should on paper be amazing, going down as well. So as I continue to assert, let's all relax.
Absolutely, yeah. So far we are in most cases for most teams we are less than 5 games into the season. And so just like we did our way too early power rankings, it's way too early to read into the losses. Absolutely, there was no way in my mind I would have expected the Predators and the Avalanche to be the only 2 teams with no points scored at this point in time. However, it can change very quickly when you think about the leaders in the West have 8 points. That's 4 games. You've played 3 so far. It's not a huge gap to catch up. It is so early. It is an 82 game season, people. So 0-3 in 3 games, that's 79 more opportunities. I'll start to be concerned and panic, like Corey was saying, in a month or 2 months after we've gotten closer to that third of the way through the season. That's when we can start to see the trends and the injuries after they've started to pile up, how the teams have responded.
And I'll fully acknowledge that it's a lot more fun to perform analysis when you win. And when you lose, when you're losing, people want to know why. What's the reason? Who's responsible? And then they'll look for a scapegoat, whether it's their own eye test, whether they're what they're reading or what they're listening to. But that's easy. And sometimes it may be true to an extent that you can point to that one specific player on that one specific play and say, that's it right there. But what happened around that player? What happened before that play? What happened before that game? There's a lot of intangibles in hockey and a lot of things that go on where we have to recall that these athletes are human beings and not robots. And I think that's one of the things that makes sports so beautiful is they're fickle. We pay for our tickets, we pull it up on the TV, and the result is never guaranteed. And yet we are fully invested anyway. And we can ultimately lose our time, lose our money, and yet here we are, and we are then forced to face the reality of the outcome right away. We can't hide from it, and yet we keep coming back to the game all the same. Basically, what I'm saying is I don't like that we're losing either. But, dot, dot, dot.
Well, exactly, but ... And what you mentioned is sometimes looking for one player to scapegoat. And I'm not going to lie, like you said, Georgiev has not been great to start the season, but it's like you said, it's also not entirely one player's fault. It is not entirely his fault. If the Avs defense shows up a little bit better in ways and isn't cheating forward on stuff so much and getting beat on the rush, then Georgiev is in a better position to play better. And so it's not just one player, like you said. It does take a team. It is a collective effort. And you got to remember, these are the first games back. Not everyone plays in preseason. The preseason is very short. So these first games are like a lot of the preseason for a lot of these players. They're gelling on their new line. Sometimes there's injuries. I know in your last episode you mentioned how the second line has had so much change game in, game out. That's hard for a team to adapt and be ready to come out and play playoff level hockey. That's why we have a whole season. That's why we have 82 games, so that over time a team can develop, build that gel together, and actually play some quality hockey. However, that doesn't mean we don't watch or we don't care. These games still matter, and as fans, it is still important to continue showing up. And like you said, they will not always be fun to do the analysis, or it'll sometimes hurt, feel the pain of the losses as they're happening. But there is no good without the bad. There is no light without the dark. So without the losses and the low times, how can you recognize or appreciate the highs and the wins? So we'll see how everyone responds as we get closer to 15, 20 games into the season here.
Exactly. And what people need to remember is these Avalanche, they will win. And it sucks because tonight we're recording this episode right before the Bruins game. That is not a great team to have to try and have a comeback game against. But at the same time, it's a great team to try and have a comeback game against, because if you beat the Boston Bruins, man, you should feel really, really good about yourselves. But, you know, these guys aren't the 1974-75 Washington Capitals who finished with a record of 867-5. I promise everyone that is not going to happen. But you lead me into my point, Dom, that this team is so mentally hard on themselves. And I think you can see it, especially and hear it in their interviews. Cale Makar was quoted saying, I think it would have been a much different game had I not been out there. And that's crazy to hear from the guy who's the world's greatest defenseman. But I think when you have that label, that title on you, I think you're naturally just harder on yourself when you make mistakes. And I don't know if that's always very fair to those guys. And I mean, you know, this is a team with championship aspirations. And I think the biggest difference is they're trying so hard to be that 2022 team. Well, that 2022 team hadn't won anything yet. Nathan McKinnon, I'm going into my 9th year and I haven't won shit. So the mentality was different. You're just trying to get to that mountain. Well, now they've been to that mountain and they hold themselves to that expectation. But maybe it's not about being the 2022 team, because you still hear that comparison so often. And in my opinion, that was the greatest Avalanche team to lace them up. Quit trying to be the 2022 team. You're not ever going to be the 2022 team. Be the 2024-25 team. Be the Avalanche team who you need to be right now. And it sucks because you can feel the panic whenever one goes in on Georgiev. And as much as for a goaltender, you're supposed to sit there and you're supposed to mentally reset yourself and pretend that play didn't happen. We're all human beings. You still know that it happened. It's still in your memory. And I could only wish that this team wasn't so hard on themselves. But of course, when you're getting less than favorable results on the ice, what else can you do, I suppose?
Well, you're absolutely right there. I think part of it though is that mindset of a champion. Before they went in as underdogs, they had nothing to lose and everything to gain, trying to climb up that mountaintop. But now that they've shown what they can do, or for someone like Cale Makar, he knows what he's capable of. And so no matter what pressures are put on him externally, he has that mindset of a champion to put more pressure on him internally. All the best players, no matter what sport they're playing, are always good at turning off the noise from the outside, and they focus internally. And no matter what pressure might be on them externally, there's more internally. They have that mindset of a champion where no matter, even if people are saying their performance has been great, it's still not good enough for them. And so while you don't want the fans to necessarily be too hard on someone like Cale when when he makes a mistake, you do have to respect and appreciate that he has that mindset and that attitude for himself, that commitment to continue working hard to improve, and just the humility to also admit when he has not played his best. I think that's key to being classy in a professional sport, and just owning up to your mistakes and owning up when you can be better, but also pushing yourself to be better constantly. Because if you're not going forwards in a league like this that's so fast, unfortunately you are kind of going backwards just by standing stationary, because everyone else is trying to move forward. So while you might not be moving backwards, as the league comes forward, you get passed by. So I do respect that mindset from Cale. And I like you said, I think, just going back to what you said about Boston, I think this is a great opportunity tonight. A very consistent team that's made the playoffs for 8 consecutive years now. You can stop the slide, get a big win against a team like that, and that can shift your whole momentum for the next few games.
Exactly. And they're putting Georgiev in tonight, so I hope he can have that. But going back to what you said, I do agree. And I think having that accountability to say, hey, that was me, and not necessarily throw the blame on others is good. But as I will always say, and I'll say it probably 1,000 times, people get sick of it, one player does not a team make. And while one mistake from a player may lead to a goal, for example, as Cale Makar did, there are plenty of other things that happen throughout a game that could lead to other results. You know, you missed something here, and it seems small in the grand scheme of things, but if you go back, you replay it, you go over it with the coach in the video room, say, hey, if you would have done this, this, and this, oh, that would have gone in easily, and the game would have been completely different. But Ultimately, I do agree with you. Having the accountability shows, I think, responsible leadership, especially when you're missing your captain right now. And I'm not saying that those guys shouldn't be held accountable, whether it's from the media, the fans, or themselves, but it's sometimes tough to see a guy that you know can play so well say or be pretty harsh on himself.
Yeah, I think that is a good point right there too. Is you do want to see the accountability, but you don't want to see them tearing themselves down. That is one thing that I'm no psychologist, but I guarantee you, you ask someone who's a therapist and who has studied, tearing yourself down or just being too hard on yourself, you can't hate yourself better. So you have to still be able to pick yourself up. You still have to be backing yourself, at least internally or even externally as well. You still have to give yourself that own reassurance and keep your confidence level up. So while you have to own those mistakes, you're absolutely right. If you're too harsh on yourself, it will only have the opposite effect and be negative. So I do think that's just something for Kale and any leader to be mindful of. And to be fair, he is a relatively young leader, so I'm sure that's something that he is still learning over time as he is trying to fill major shoes while Landy's out. So we'll see how he gets better over time as well in that role, and I'm sure Kale will be fine. He has too much raw talent and hockey sense to not be able to overcome one small mistake.
You're exactly right. But to continue on here, I'd like to end this section on a positive note. Right before we started recording today, the Buffalo Sabres were taking on the Pittsburgh Penguins, and Sidney Crosby has officially joined the 1,600 point club with an assist on one of the Penguins' goal. He is the 10th player in NHL history all time to do so.
Well, congratulations to Mr. Crosby. For those of you who have listened to the first episode may recall, he's one of my players to watch this year, and I'm glad to see his campaign towards a third consecutive 90-point season is off to a good start.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Well, Tom, I've done a lot of yapping, and I'm sure everybody's sick of hearing my voice. So, would you like to take us into some early season recaps, other news around the NHL, things that you've been noticing that you had pointed out to me? I'd love to hear what you got.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to start out in the East, and we covered this originally, but we always said it was going to be a gauntlet. It is always a tight race for the wild card spots. It's always super competitive and physical. And I'm not going to go too much into injuries today. I want to focus more on the team aspect and the points scored. But I do expect that those injuries will continue to pile up in the Eastern Division, where you do have to be physical, where there's not a single team who has not scored a point. The best record right now are the Devils at 4-2, and they have played more games than anyone else in the league at 8 points. Nonetheless, though, this is a team that, Corey, you and I both said we are hopeful for, or we have high expectations for this season, coming off of what they're building on last year. We think they have a high ceiling and a lot of good potential this year. I think what's crazy to see is in the Atlantic Division that the entire 8 teams are separated by just 4 points. The Panthers at 3-2, sitting on 6 points, have a -1 goal differential. So even with the best record in the Atlantic, they are still being outscored by opponents on the whole of the season. So again, it's very early, folks. There's going to be a lot of up and down, and it's going to start out very close. But this is what we expect from the East. We expect to see the Devils, the Rangers, the Penguins, the Panthers, the Lightning, the Maple Leafs. We expect to see these teams at the top half of the division and doing well. But at the same time, we do still expect it to be super close. And it's not like other teams are getting run over either. The Blue Jackets might be in last in the Metropolitan, but they are still have a goal differential of 0. They've scored just as many goals as they've conceded. So they're very competitive, even if they're in last place. Shifting over to the Western Conference just a little bit as an overall summary, the Stars and the Jets have started just how we would have expected. Both are undefeated and riding high at the top of the Central Division. My slight underdog pick in those like mid to or the low 20s, like that 2021 range from the power rankings, the Calgary Flames. have come out hot, scoring 19 goals. I believe that is the most in the league, tied with the Devils thus far this season. So we'll see if that's sustainable over the whole of the season or if they're capitalizing on some of the early season mistakes other teams have made. But it's great to see that Canadian team, that storied franchise, being able to bounce back and start off the season well. Conversely, we mentioned it a bit previously, but the Oilers, the Predators, the Avalanche, they have really stumbled out of the gate. They've not been able to. I mean, the Oilers do technically have a win now in their 4 games, but
It
otherwise,
was
they
not
all
a
have three
it was a
losses.
close one. That's for
It was a close one. The Avalanche have given up 20 goals on the year, the Oilers 18. So there's some defensive things that need to get worked out here. The Oilers, that powerful offense from last year, have only scored 7 goals so far this year. When you think of McDavid and Draisaitl with that extension, you expect high scoring. You expect that if you're going to beat Edmonton, you have to score at least 4 goals because you can count on them to score 3 per game, if not more. Um, Taking it back to the positive, though, how about Utah? You and I were both so
How
excited
about
about the
them
change of
Uters,
scenery.
baby? Yeah.
That hockey club, God, they need a better name. I hope it's like the Mammoth or the Yeti or something fun like that. But they've come out with force, and I think they've been underestimated by a lot of teams, treating them. I think you covered it briefly in the last episode, but coming in expecting them to be the Arizona Coyotes, to be this not weak, but this uninspired team coming out on the ice night in, night out. But they've come out with passion and with force, and they've taken it to their opponents. And it's been impressive to see. I'm very excited to continue watching Utah. I think they should absolutely be considered a threat for the playoffs even now. I know it's way too early, and we talk about not overreacting to the bad things at the start of the season, and we should also keep that in mind for the good things at the start of the season. But it just seems to be gelling. They're winning close games. They only have a +2 goal differential, having scored 16 and given up 14 goals this year. But at the same time, they are winning. They are succeeding. They are thriving in these close games. And they are just playing well for the full 60 minutes, which not every team can say right now. So those are, I think, some of the bigger storylines going on. I will save my commentary on the Sharks for a bit later because they have been oh so close in pretty much every game this year. And I feel like there are teams like that that are just they're close, and they'll get there once we've had some more time to be on the ice together and just get through the motions and get into that rhythm.
Yeah, and I mean, just as what you were saying, you're seeing teams that on paper should not be doing well, and teams that on paper should be doing very well. And with it being so early, sports is so reactionary. And I mean, it has to be. If you take too long to think about it, then you've missed the story. And I think sports are a lot like the stock market, where we're making assumptions and decisions based on right now, but we can only use historical data to get a full view and try and make more accurate predictions and decisions. And I truly feel like we'll look back at this to the season and when we're at the finish line and laugh, because you need the whole season to assess it. But when I said this statement to a mentor of mine, he made a good point, to which he said, by then it's too late. So it's a fine balance where you have to take what's happening right now into account in order to make corrections, in order to prevent future mistakes. So there is some importance to be mindful of what's going on right now, but as we've reassured people, it is still early. I always like to reflect back to the Ducks going on an absolute 10-game tear at the beginning of the season last year, and then ending up exactly where everybody thought they would at the end of last season. And I think the same thing will happen to the Flames, unfortunately. How they're doing this well is kind of a mystery. They have lost their best goaltender, their best defenseman, a lot of their top line scorers. I mean, you have Jonathan Huberdeau, who, bless his heart, can't. I don't want to bully Jonathan Huberdeau, but when you said the Jets are out exactly where we thought they were, I thought the Jets would be lower. I still am sitting on that. I don't think they'll be as great by the end of the season. The Stars, of course, is no surprise. Good to see that the Devils are doing well. But yeah, I digress. I'm just rambling at this point.
No, it's all right. Your sound is cutting out a little bit there, though, man. So I'm not sure what was happening there. But yeah, I
Uh-oh.
guess I have the Jets projected as a playoff team. Again, we expect the Jets. What they did last year, I know you mentioned it in the first episode, was they were a big defensive team last year, and they have kept that this year. And I think we all didn't expect that to regress too much. They have given up a league low 2 goals on the entire new season so far. That is tied only with the Lightning, one less game. So overall, starting well, keeping to what they know. Connor Hellebuck just playing great between the pipes as always. And as a team, the Jets have been bringing a lot of good defense. I do see your point, and there will be a regression to the mean with the Flames. I expect a regression to the mean a little bit from the Golden Knights as well, especially once the Canucks and Oilers get ramped up to full speed. But I want to pivot a little bit because when we're talking about the here and now, before it's too long gone, I want to just briefly mention the Columbus Blue Jackets again. And I know I mentioned them in the first episode as a possible underdog when teams who have had tragedy surrounding them, we see how sometimes they can really outperform expectations or even their talent level. And they've took it to their opponents. They had their home opener, the Blue Jackets did on Tuesday night, and they were so very nearly able to beat the Florida Panthers. They outshot the Panthers 38-22 in that game, and and even with all of that intensity that I wanted to talk about, and there might be in last place in the Metropolitan, but by no means count them out. The real story here is how they chose to honor Johnny Gaudreau
That was
and
a
the
beautiful
class,
ceremony.
the
Beautiful
class
ceremony.
from Florida. I think for anyone listening to this, pause it right now and just go on YouTube and look up, because they at the start they took the face off and everyone on the ice knew there were only 4 players out for the Blue Jackets because their left winger wasn't there. And that empty spot, the face-off was won to that side, and the player for Florida left the puck right where Gaudreau would have been standing. They ran the clock for 13 seconds for his number. It was beautiful. It was poetic. The love and the unity from both teams and from the whole hockey world and the sport around that moment was something to behold. So while Columbus might not have the best season, they're going to have some beautiful moments like that, and I thoroughly encourage everyone to watch it because it is a breath-stopping, heart-wrenching moment.
Yeah, I did get the chance to watch the ceremony, and it genuinely did make me cry. So if you are a regular hockey fan and you're really connected to the NHL and you haven't seen this, do be prepared for this to really pull at your heart. It was very beautiful, though. It's great to see that they got right on retiring his number into the rafters. My heart breaks for obviously all of Johnny's family, but his father in particular, who couldn't even have the strength to look up to see his son's number in the rafters. I truly hope the best for him, and it's great to see that the hockey world has rallied around him and has invited him to things, kept him included within the community, and I only hope that that continues, because I can't even imagine the pain of losing your child. And then obviously when Sean Monahan scored later in that game, he immediately pointed up to Johnny's number in the rafters. So it was a really beautiful moment. It was a beautiful night, and obviously wish they could have won that one, but all the best for putting up, as you said, a great, intense performance against the league's best team, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not the league's best team so far to start the season, but certainly the defending champions have to be considered the best team in the league. And yeah, they put up a stubborn and a very close fight with the Panthers, and to have that parallel storyline going on was again, it's something that I intend to follow throughout the year. I'm not a Blue Jackets fan by nature, but I think for this year I'll be as much a Blue Jackets fan as anyone, keeping up on their news and their highlights, because I think it is also important for hockey to pause, and for any sport to pause in those big moments. And I really, like you said, I'm glad they have, and that they have done what they can for the family and to keep them united. Like you said, I can't imagine the pain that would come from losing a family member so close, but especially your child. That old adage that you should never outlive your children and that suffering. So to have, you really do need a village, a community behind you to get through something like that. And so, like you said, I'm glad to see that Columbus has done that.
Absolutely. Well, with that note, are we ready to pivot into some Avalanche news?
Absolutely. Please take it away, Captain Avalanche.
I would like to obviously not just cut that off, but once again, our hearts go out to the Columbus Blue Jackets and everybody in the Gaudreau family. So all the best, as you said, Dom, for the Columbus Blue Jackets. And I look forward to you keeping up with them throughout the season, because obviously I can only watch so much hockey. So I'm excited to see how they go throughout the season and hopefully see that city, those players, that family heal through time. But obviously time will never take away the pain of that loss. So, alrighty, everybody, but we must push forward. So going into tonight, it is worth noting that Jonathan Drouin, unfortunately, the news has come down that not only is he injured still and will not be in tonight, but their original assessment for only 2 games and then reassess, it seems like the injury was more severe than they had originally anticipated, which is really super fucking news considering how well everything's going so far. So that's great. As well as Devon Toews will also still be out this evening with a lower body injury. They did indicate that that was not serious, but who the hell knows at this point? Everything's not serious until you're missing a guy for 2 years. So I don't know. It's not great. But looking at the projected lineups for tonight, the Bruins have no injuries, couple scratches, but otherwise it's the exact team that you would expect them to be. The Avalanche are running similar lines to what they did against the Islanders. It looks like Ross Colton will remain on the top line with McKinnon and Rantanen. Casey Middlestat still running that second line with Cal Ritchie and Miles Wood. And it looks like the third line is fronted by Parker Kelly, and Matt Steinberg was called up this evening with his wings being Ivan and Yoel Kiviranta. I will say I'm super glad that Kovalenko and Ivan have gotten to stick around. They've each collected either some points or some goals, although I don't know if Kovalenko has just yet, but Callum Ritchie obviously scoring his first goal, super exciting. They have Oliver Chillington again on the top line with Cale Makar. They have scratched John Ludwig for the evening, which I don't know if I agree with. I frankly thought if you had to ask me and Calvin DeHaan is back, if you had to ask me against the Islanders who had the better game, Ludwig or Chillington, I would feel that it was Ludwig. There was a couple of mistakes here and there, but overall, I thought he had a more impactful game, and I really liked his giddy up on a team that he has no familiarity with, and I thought he played actually pretty well, all things considered. Had a couple moments where he almost put a couple in, set up a couple nice plays that unfortunately didn't result in anything, but I like John Ludwig's play. No offense to Chillington, but he just did not feel like an impact player in that last game. So going into our notes here for the Islanders at Avs, obviously the result was not what we wanted, but let's run through it period by period. I have a summary here and we'll leave some room for discussion. So from period 1, I'm not disappointed with what I'm seeing or hearing. I caught about the first half of it on the radio as I was driving home and the next half on TV. And it's truly funny that after talking about Cal Ritchie in the previous episode saying he needs to do a little more, he goes and he gets his first goal in like the first minute of the game. And during this period, you could feel that the Avalanche wanted it. They were fired up, especially with that early goal. They were physical. They were playing much more cohesively. And I didn't think the score was indicative of performance, at least in that first period. And I agree with everyone else, the announcers, the analysts, that the second goal that got by Georgiev was unlucky. He made the right choice when he reaches out to poke, but of course, you get it to where he poke checks it. It ricochets off of the player's skates. I believe it was Anders Lee, and goes right onto his stick and into the back of the net. I mean, you can't get more unlucky than that.
Yeah, I think luck is as much a part of any sport as skill, unfortunately. I mean, and maybe it's not unfortunate. That's how it goes. There's bounces, there's coin flips, things just happen in sport that you can't practice or account for. So like you said, as long as you're playing well fundamentally over the course of a season, it should work out in the long term, even if in an individual game it takes a bad bounce.
And I think you hit a good point. There's fundamentals. I do think, and I want to know more what this means, Dom. Maybe you can answer this question, because it seems like the Avs need to simplify. They just need to play a simpler game in order to make things happen. I think when they're getting behind, they're trying to do too much because they're getting behind so often. So they just need to slow down and make a simpler game. And if you don't know the answer, that's fine. But Dom, what is a simpler game? When analysts say, they need to play a simpler game of hockey, what does that mean?
Well, a simpler game of hockey I would interpret to be as a possession-based game of hockey. It's playing tic-tac-toe, tape-to-tape passes. It's about not trying to force the pass that could get you that goal, but by maintaining possession that you have more opportunities for good passes, or that eventually you will set up an opportunity for a shot. So I think that is what we talk about with simpler hockey. I think when you have the talent on a roster and the speed and just the individual ability on the Avs, it can be hard to sit within a system and just hold the puck or wait. Spend your shift not moving a ton or not seeing the puck a ton or doing anything fancy, trying to do your best. But sometimes what simple hockey is not about the individual player's best. It is about the team's best. And like I said, that's where it comes down to possession. If you as a team are holding control of the puck, if you're making good passes, if you're not making turnovers, the opponent can't score against you. If they can't get the puck from you, they can't in the net. And that's what it comes down to, is points. If you hold the puck and you score less goals in the game, but you win 2-1, a win is a win. But if you're going for the goal every time and you're overextending yourself or you're cheating ahead too much, you can get caught out on the D end. And so maybe 40% of the time you will score, but the other 60% of the time you might give up an odd man rush. And so that's where you find yourself losing games by higher score totals, 6-4, 7-5. Those games that we've seen to start the season from a lot of teams where it's just high scoring back and forth. A simpler game of hockey is settling in. It is playing defense. It is focusing on possession. It's focusing on physicality and winning the puck battles, playing the chip and chase game rather than trying to thread seam passes to enter the zone. It really is just dumping it deep and going in there and fighting for it, playing the hard minutes. So that's, in my opinion, what a simpler style or a simpler game of hockey comes down to. And if you start with that and get into a rhythm and start to sense where each other will be on the ice with your line mates and get into that flow and just have that sixth sense on when you know where your teammates will be, that's when over time you can start to evolve and get back to those more advanced things. You can start to push the boundary and do the more fancy elements of hockey.
I think that is a perfect way to define it, and frankly helped improve my own understanding, and also segues perfectly to my summary of period number 2, in that the Avalanche did not have a lot of extended zone time in the Islanders' end. And somehow the Islanders, a very non-offense oriented team, plays very boring hockey, put up a shit ton of offense against the Avs that obviously resulted in several goals. I mean, you're looking by the end of this period and the shot differential was massive. And the Avs in this period still had plenty of almosts and maybes, but without that extended possession, it makes it difficult to build that momentum and be able to get in that rhythm that you were talking about. Not to mention, when you're down against a team with an elite goaltender like Sorokin, a true number one, even if you can finally push past that Islanders defense, you still have to beat a guy you know can stop the puck. Really, the Avalanche struggled to keep the puck on their stick, and 50% of that was Good Isles defense, and the other 50% was somehow just the Avs themselves. And I attribute some of that to that bad luck that we were talking about. You had pucks jumping over sticks at an absurd rate, and it felt like the luck was almost ridiculous with certain things that just absolutely should have gone in and somehow didn't. And even the guys who normally wouldn't have this issue, if I had a nickel for how many pucks were passed by the Avs between two of their own players at the blue line and down to their own end, I would be rich. And I'd like to say that it was a nothing burger of a period, but that simply wasn't the case because the Islanders' shot volume and goal total ended up paying off.
Yeah, it wasn't a nothing burger, it was a negative. And all those ifs and buts and almosts and maybes and even those nickels at the end of the day, none of them get you on the scoreboard, none of them count towards the end of the game score, and so none of them matter. You can say ifs and buts, and sure, if you're playing fundamental hockey, sometimes the bounces aren't going to go your way. But it's just like in another sport if you're blaming the ref. It's 60 minutes of play. You can make a mistake, or if you don't like something the ref calls, but ultimately there's so much time to recover. You can't blame any one thing or any one person for the mistakes in a game. It is a team effort, and again, like you said, that's what it goes back to. I didn't mention it in my analysis, but yeah, offensive zone time. When you're playing a good defense and a good goaltender, you don't have to take a shot just to take a shot. I mean, don't get me wrong. Sometimes we talk about it, or we will talk about it more, but it's known in hockey that you throw the puck at the net and good things happen. But sometimes when you know you're playing that good defense and that good goaltender behind them, you just need to hold the puck in their zone for a while, trap them on the ice, get them a little tired so they're a bit slower, and then start to go for those offense. Try to set up turn that 5-on-5 into a man advantage, and just take the wind out of your opponent's sails a little bit. When they've been taking advantage of you and your mistakes, you need to settle it down and put them back in their end. And the Avs did not do that in their game.
What you've just described is essentially what the Islanders had done to the Avs. And I actually pointed it out in this bullet point right here is another problem that the Avalanche had last year was getting stuck in their own zone, which again is a problem I hope is addressed this year, because it doesn't matter what line it was, the Avs are just getting trapped. And it isn't just with the Islanders. It's an issue that I noticed with almost every team. And it was a consistent issue last year that led to multiple scoring chances, opportunities, and goals. And what you had just described, I think, is exactly how the Islanders played the game and one of the big reasons why they won. Obviously, there were some defensive errors from some of our guys that led to goals. There was some bad luck, but ultimately they wore the Avalanche down and took the wind out of their sails.
Yeah, bad luck, like I said, can only account for so much of it. There is that point where you have to be accountable. And yeah, I think, like you said, the Islanders style of hockey is boring or simple, one might say, but sometimes boring is best. Especially early in the season, those fundamentals and just playing hockey, it might feel like you're playing at a junior level or even at like a collegiate level, but it's effective. It gets things done. It gets everybody settled in. It gets you into a rhythm. And then that's where you can build on with the more fantastical and the unique things that we've seen players like McDavid, McKinnon, Makar do in the league with just their own single talent. But early on, this is the time in particular of the year where having that consistent team play and in playing, being able to play boring and win ugly is important. Winning ugly games is a skill. Being able to muck it up in those areas and just play boring but fundamentally sound defensive hockey gets you games. We hear it in other sports, but defense wins championships. And maybe we can say that about goaltending specifically, but in any sport, the fundamentals have to come first.
Yeah. And this, my third period analysis, much to the same of the second, and it's too little too late to make a push like that. They finally started playing in the final 2 minutes. And this is really to show that despite me saying, don't hit the panic button right now, I'm not content with losing. It doesn't feel good. I'm sitting there on my couch screaming with my family all the same. It's not something that I enjoy. Because I mean, I'm an adult in life. You know, I'll go to work or I'll go to class and I'll bust my ass the whole day. And I'm so looking forward to Avalanche hockey at the end of the day. So when I get to finally sit down and watch my team put out an absolute fucking stinker, doesn't mean I'm happy about it, despite me coming on here and saying, quit booing our players and everybody relax. I don't feel good about it either. And
Yeah, we were not saying it ever feels good to lose, but there's always a lesson here in loss, and so at a certain point, if the losing continues to happen, then there's more cause for concern and to express more anger towards the team.
But it's just disappointing because we're losing. We can't take time to recognize things like Casey Middlestat now has a 3-game goal streak. He scored in every game the Avalanche have played so far, which I'm so happy about. And Nathan MacKinnon has reignited his home point streak despite it only being 2 games. Instead, we obviously, and rightfully should, focus on our problems and mistakes. But yeah, that's just where we're at right now. I hope MacKinnon can keep the point streak going again. I hope he can rightfully get the record. He should have had, I think, 37 games. I went and looked. It was a weird thing with the Rangers game where his streak ended. I was at that game, but anyway, I digress. But speaking of goaltenders, which we were not speaking of goaltenders at all 5 minutes ago, Dom, you have a scouting report for me and all the other Avalanche fans out there, don't you?
I do, and for those who don't know, the Avalanche recently signed a former San Jose Shark and a former member of the Minnesota Wild, as well as the New Jersey Devils, and that is goaltender Kaapo Kahkonen. And he's a young goaltender, currently 28 years old, or on the younger side of goaltending, we'll say. His first inaugural season was in the 2019-2020 season with Minnesota, where he played 5 games, winning 3 of them and only allowing 15 goals in those 5 games for a .913 save percentage. It was near the end of the year. Minnesota was already out of it, if I recall. So he got to see some opportunity in the garbage minutes near the end of the season, and he played well to start his career. He is a rather large goaltender at 6'2", 216 pounds, so he's one of those guys that you see hulking in there who can take up a lot of space in the net. Might not be the most electric with his glove and making those saves that way, but he just takes up so much space that there's smaller gaps to thread that needle with the puck. Continuing on, though, he has never been a full-time 80 game per year starter, or really even that true 1B starter who's playing close to 40 games in a season. In fact, in 2022-23 with the Sharks, he played his most games for a season in his career at 37. And actually, he technically did play 37 in 23-24 season as well. However, 6 of those were with the Devils and only 31 were with the Sharks. Unfortunately for the Avs, I'm sorry to tell you, he does not have a great winning percentage. He is 49-67 with 15 OT losses as well in his starts. However, I don't believe that is entirely his fault. We do have to take into account that he was goaltending for the Sharks in the last couple of years, and I love my team to death, but this is a Sharks team that was giving up a lot of goals, not playing good fundamentals really in anywhere on the ice, but especially on defense. And in those 22, 23, 23, 24 stints with the Sharks, that period of time, his goals against average were .385 and .382. Anytime he's played on another team, however, and when he played 11 games for the Sharks in the 21-22 season, he has always maintained a goals against per game average of less than 3. So it is important to note that his stats are torn down a little bit by having played for such a bad Sharks team for so long. And this, like I said, was seen when he first started with the Wild. He came out really hot in his first year, and even in his second year, playing 24 games, starting 22 of them, he did go 16-8. And so I don't want to say his prime is past by any means. He is very capable of that. And in that 21-22 season, he did start off okay at 12-8 with Minnesota before being traded over to the Sharks. But since then, since ending up in San Jose, he is rightfully so not played very well. It is partly environment. I know I talked about it. There's something about playing in the tank that at times can be goaltender kryptonite. We saw, Martin Jones, just to take a little side tangent here, was wonderful and pretty much single-handedly put the team on his back to get the Sharks to the Stanley Cup final, where they eventually lost to the Penguins, and then went on to be awful for the next couple of years before moving on to Seattle, where he played great in Seattle's inaugural season, if I recall correctly, and he got them into a playoff spot and keeping them competitive. So goaltenders can rebound. They can have those highs, have some period of lows, and then bounce back. We've talked about how goaltenders aren't always having the highest level of consistency. So it is important to keep that in mind, that all hope is not lost yet. And finishing last season with the Devils, he started and played in 6 games, finishing with a record of 1 win and 4 losses. It is important to note, though, that that 1 win was a shutout. And he, in those 6 games, had his best save percentage on his career to end the season at 923, allowing only 11 goals on 143 shots. So I think there is hope that he could. I'm not sure if he'll be on the active roster right away for the Avalanche, but there is hope that by week's end or within the next, let's say, 5 games, I expect it to be less, that you'll see Kaapo Kahkonen on the bench as Georgiev's backup, or possibly even starting if Georgiev can't seem to get over that slump and get a win.
I think you pretty much answered all of the questions that I would have ultimately had. Because I've seen two camps really. One is from Sharks fans saying that, oh yeah, you guys picked up a really solid goaltender, just like you said, bad environment, but this guy, he's gonna do well for you, yada yada. And then obviously my camp that's a little hesitant with those career numbers, but I do always agree that environmental shifts can help, especially when you're playing behind a contending team, one with better team defense, although the Avalanche's team defense is not fantastical at this current time. But I guess my biggest question for you, Dom, is just from a pure subjective opinion of yours, did we get a good goaltender here? Is this someone that, I should be like, yeah, this is going to be a good backup guy? Or in your opinion, seeing him as a Sharks fan, or are you just like, eh?
Well, my take on a lot of Sharks goaltenders, and I do say meh as I did about Adin Hill, but of course we did cover how Hill has his name on the Stanley Cup. So even when I feel that way, I think to answer your question in its intent, can he be a good backup? I think yes. I think he is a serviceable backup. I think he's the type of player where you should be able to count on him to play 30 games a year and keep you in the hunt, where he's giving up, I would say, that 2 to 3 goals a game. And when you have an offense like the Avs do, you should hopefully expect to be able to score 1 goal per period and be having at least 3 goals per game. So that keeps it competitive. That gets you to overtime. That gets you to score at least a minimum of a point, even if there's an OT loss. So I think the way I would say it is he's a serviceable backup. The way Georgie has started the season, I think he could sometimes, that like we talked about, that change of scenery, a different face, different player, it can be electrifying. It can re-energize a fan base, which can just then feed back into the team. So I think overall on the whole, it is a good thing for you guys. I am concerned though, like you said, while the Avs team defense is better than the Sharks in the last couple of years, it's also quite difficult to have a defense worse than the Sharks have had the last couple of years. There is still cause for concern. He, as a goaltender, has made some really fantastical saves and shown sparks of really high talent and prowess, but at the same time has also let in some really easy goals that he probably should have had. So it is a little bit hit or miss, hot and cold. I do hope, or I am optimistic, knowing that he has talent, that he can be a net positive for the Avs, but he's not going to be your rock solid, lock it in for the playoffs, set it and forget it goaltender that you can just count on to get you a shutout when you need it. He's not going to be that Jake Ottinger. He's not going to be that Hellebuck when he's playing his best. He's not going to be an Igor Shesterkin. He's going to be that Adin Hill guy where if you play good enough defense in front of him, and if you can control possession for enough of the game, he will get you there and he will get you over the finish line for that win. He will be able to hold an opponent to 2 goals when you score 3, or 3 when you score 4.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing I ultimately wanted people to know is, obviously when you're picking up a goaltender off waivers, people wonder, oh, is this a sign for a change in net? Are the Avs going to be moving Justus Onanen or Alexander Georgiev? I don't think so. I just think they're trying to get a backup with NHL experience, and don't expect Kaapo Kahkonen to come in and be obviously the savior for anything. So yeah, that I think you hit it all on the head. Everything that we probably need to know, but we'll keep it rolling with the Sharks here, and we're gonna go into our now aptly named segment, In the Tank with Dom. Dom, you got some stuff to talk about the Sharks today, so including the newest phenom, Macklin Celebrini, although he's starting to get upstaged by Matvei Michkov. So what do you got, Tom, about our lovely Sharks?
Well, I'm actually going to start really quickly. And just while we were talking about goaltenders, I just want to give a quick mention to the man, the myth, the legend, the reason the Sharks have been competitive this year.
Mackenzie
Mackenzie
Blackwood.
Blackwood.
Yeah.
Absolutely. He did not have the best time with the Devils last year. I believe these two actually swapped, and that is when the Devils at the end of the season picked up Kahkonen, is when we traded and picked up Blackwood, and is the perfect example of how a change of scenery can make all the difference. He has been playing lights out between the pipes. And like I said, has been keeping the Sharks in games. And I'll go into detail here because since I was not on the last episode for everyone, I'm sorry again about that. I was going to give us a quick little recap of all 3 games the Sharks have played so far, including some of those storylines like you said about Macklin Celebrini. But right here, Mackenzie Blackwood is a perfect example of one of those goaltenders whose goals against average, his win-loss record, it wasn't stellar, but the potential was there as a prospect. Those flashes of raw talent that can make those incredible saves was always there. And sometimes just a fresh start, a change of scenery can make all the difference for a player, and just being trusted with that chance instead of being stuck in a backup role. Because I believe for New Jersey, they had him in their goalie 3 role, primarily in the AHL. So I'm glad to see him thriving to start the season. And like I said, even though the Sharks have still not won a game yet this year, it is not Mackenzie Blackwood's fault, because he has been doing everything in his power, just standing on his head between the pipes to really give us a chance to win the games. And with that in mind, I'm just going to go right into game 1, unless there's anything else you would like to add, Corey.
No, sir. Only that I was disappointed that once we finally hit the skills competition for their game against Dallas, he just couldn't hold it down. But man, that entire game he played so well, really giving Jake Ottinger a run for his money. But otherwise, please continue on.
No, you're absolutely right, and that is an area of his game that the way the Sharks are playing this year in these games, if they are going to keep them close, he is going to need to be better in overtime and in shootouts. That because the Sharks, while he is getting them to that point and helping them hold on, they do need him to improve in that one-on-one game against, as you put it, the skills competition. And to be fair, the Stars have a lot of young, talented goal scorers. So by no means was I expecting to win that shootout, especially without Macklin in the lineup. But I was hoping that he could have at least come up with a save in that shootout. Nonetheless, I'm going to jump us back to game 1 versus St. Louis, and Macklin Celebrini scores, as you dubbed it, a goober goal the first period, less than 10 minutes into a game. It was the second fastest a rookie first overall pick has scored in their inaugural season, in their home opener, or in their opener in their first ever game, second to only Mario Lemieux. So great company for Celebrini to already be in.
Seriously.
And not only that, later on, again in the first period, he set up a beautiful assist with so much awareness and a nice little fake behind the net, set up Tyler Toffoli for one of the easiest goals you'll see, and got to Foley his first goal in a Sharks uniform. And that was the highlights of the first period. However, and the Sharks ended the period ahead 2-1. However, by no means was that first period the Sharks period that they dominated. The Blues took the first, I believe, 7 or it might have been 8 shots on goal, before MacLeod scored that lucky goal. And it was a wonderful play. He was trying to backhand pass it right to the middle. He had multiple players cutting through to the ice trying to get that tip, and he just happened to catch a skate from the Blues defender to get the goal. But overall, the game started slow and poorly. The team was not gelling. And Mackenzie Blackwood was the key to success in keeping the Sharks in it, allowing those lucky breaks of goals to be the difference at the end of one period, to end period one up 2-1. But the shots on goal differential was 22-11 in the first period. And just to put that in perspective, I've seen games in the past where the Sharks have not even mustered 22 shots on goal in the whole game. So to be giving up 22 shots on goal in one period, that is a lot. There needs to be improvement on defense there. There needs to be improvement with possession. But I am going to put this in the context of it is a very young team on the ice. Their first time all playing together. And it's just there are going to be some things to work out. This was still the worst team in the league last year. So even though it's bad, it can certainly be worse. Continuing on to the second period, though, the Sharks on their first power play, or one of their first power plays, it might not have been the actual first, I forgot to check that, but they did score their first power play goal of the season, midway point of the second period. Overall, that second period was far more competitive. The shots on goal differential stayed rather stable, with the Blues finishing the period ahead +9, I believe. But the Sharks were definitely much better on defense, much more competitive in that period, matching the pace of the Blues consistently. There weren't a ton of notes, although I do believe there was one or two saves by Mackenzie Blackwood that are a highlight reel within that period that, if you have the time, go watch the highlights on YouTube. I personally use Sportsnet, small plug, but they do good full game highlights that are about 10 minutes long per game. If you can't catch every game, that is where I go to for when I miss the game. So highly recommend that to all of our new fans because they do have good coverage. Moving on, though, to later in the second period, the other exciting moment for me was to see Barclay Goodrow going on the rush and with a second effort able to get a lucky bounce and scores a shorthanded goal to stretch the lead to 4-1. And so while the Sharks played more even with the Blues, they did catch those lucky breaks. They did cash in on the power play goal. Going into the third period, up 4-1 in Macklin Celebrini's debut. This is the stuff dreams are made of. I remember texting you like, holy crap, this is happening. The Sharks are going to, after waiting so long and only winning 19 games last year, we're just going to start this season with a win. And unfortunately,
tragedy would strike.
Tragedy would strike us again, and the Sharks turned out to be a two-period hockey team in that first game. There was just poor play across the board, offense, defense. It was sloppy with passes, and honestly, what I would call turtling. Trying to just play for the win and hold on to the lead rather than keeping the pressure on the Blues. They went soft. They let the Blues control the pace of the game. They let the Blues have a bit more free run of the ice. They made those sloppy turnovers and really led, in my opinion, a very mediocre St. Louis Blues team to crawl back into this game. And ultimately, it went from bad to worse with about 45 seconds left in the game. Goalie pulled for the Blues. They did score that killer game-tying goal and took all of the momentum they would have ever needed into overtime, and they proceeded to score again 45 seconds into overtime for the Blues to take that win. It was a very painful loss, to say the least, but again, not to fault Mackenzie Blackwood. He did concede 5 goals on the night, but in context, that was on 40 shots. And starting the game, allowing only 1 goal on 22 shots in the first period, the Sharks would not have had that opportunity to be up 4-1 without his heroics. And so I don't want anyone to be hard on him for how that third period went, conceding 3, especially that last one in the last minute. That is always so painful for a goaltender. And it really, I don't think, was his fault. We saw in that period some lazy or some late defense, especially from some of the younger guys, Will Smith, Eklund. They just were a little bit out of position, and I feel like still getting up to pace with the NHL level game. Even though they've played some, they weren't right where they needed to be. And so I think as the season goes on, we'll get better play in front of Blackwood. But that was it. The whole team needs to take accountability for that loss. I think the only players who really don't have something that they have to own up to for being poor are the players who really were outstanding in that game, and that was Macklin Celebrini and Blackwood. The rookie phenom came out and truly played just like that first overall pick. Seamless transition to the NHL. The raw talent was just on display. He was electric to watch, and boy, oh boy, can I not wait till I can get that Celebrini jersey, because it is something that I think every Sharks fan now knows they need if they didn't already. Unfortunately, though, if you recall, the one thing I said in the start of or early in our first episode is, what do the Sharks need to do this year? It's to win the winnable games and beat the other basement dwellers, and to not have serious injuries or to lose their young star players. And unfortunately, that both of those things happened. Celebrini after the game was put on IR. He's eligible to come back on Friday, but unfortunately that means we will not get to see the long-awaited Celebrini versus Bedard game tomorrow night that I know myself and many fans would have been looking forward to. Nonetheless, we hope to see him on, I believe, Friday or Saturday night this week in our next game when he is eligible to return from the IR. They're saying he's week to week, but I do expect him to be ready to play on the Sooner side.
What happened? I did not catch whatever incident caused him to be injured in the first place. Did he play the full game?
I do believe he played and was taking shifts throughout the full game. To my understanding, it actually seems like something that he had. It was a lower body injury, I believe a hip injury, but I believe he was already a little bit banged up in preseason or in training camp. So it seemed that there was a mild injury that was flying below the radar, and he might not have been 100% at this game, which, to put that into context, how well he played, getting in a goal and an assist in his first period of play as a professional, as an NHLer, while being injured. I just can't wait to see when he's at full health. But that is, to my understanding, what was happening, and just that little bit of wear and tear during the game, and adjusting to the fact that NHLers are just bigger and they are heavier and just hit harder. I think his body was still adapting to that and just had some soreness and some bruising. There's not a ton of details. They're keeping it quiet and just calling him week to week. But it does seem like overall he should be okay and returning to the starting lineup soon.
That's good to hear. Yeah, that's a bummer not seeing him go up against the other phenom, Bedard, but I'm assuming we'll have another opportunity.
We certainly will. Knock on wood, please have both players be healthy, because we never want to see either of them injured, no matter what team they're on. But with that in mind, I will transition to game 2 against Anaheim. And this game, there obviously was no Macklin Celebrini. And the Sharks actually came out stronger. They did not start poorly the same way they did against the Blues. This is that basement dweller rivalry game against the in-state Ducks. This is the type of game I'm talking about them winning. These teams have young rosters that we expect to be good in 4 years, 3 years, 5 years time. And this is a bit of a preview of what we might see in the playoffs in the years to come. And it was competitive and it was physical all around. The shots on goal count, there was never a huge differential between the teams. It was overall just a very nip and tuck game, good defense and just physical play all around. I do want to note that this time the great goaltending came from Vanacek. So while all the hype on Blackwood, Vanacek was also very, very sturdy in net for the Sharks in that game. And it's important to also note that early in the first period, less than 5 minutes into the game, the Sharks had not one but 2 goals that were called back due to offsides calls. One of them closer than the other, but they did come out hot. They were very close. They were ambitious. There was a stretch pass on a power play where it was thrown all the way from the defensive blue line down to the red line behind the net and bouncing off, and the rebound goal. Unfortunately, the timing to cross the line, he was offside. But the ambition, the attempt from the Sharks, that energy was a huge step up. and just a huge confidence boost for me as a fan, but also showing the confidence that the young players on the team have to be willing to attempt that. That was exciting to see that talent, even if the call did not go our way there. Ultimately, just to really wrap up how this game went, there was a goal that was conceded midway through the third, and ultimately the Sharks were not able to break through the defense and were shut out, giving up an empty netter to Zegras with less than 2 minutes left in the game. So unfortunately, this. Please do.
No, I was
say
just
what
gonna.
you were
I was
say.
just gonna say I didn't happen to catch that game, so that is tough.
Yeah, it's a game where for the fan who maybe doesn't know hockey, maybe felt like they didn't miss anything or maybe wouldn't want to watch because it was a low-scoring game and it was 0-0 for the majority of it. But this is the type of hockey game I love, where it is physical and both teams are playing with good fundamentals throughout the game. Or when they make mistakes, it was balanced. It was exciting in that sense. There was no clear an obvious better team, which even though the Sharks did lose 2-0 at the end of the day, it was gratifying to see them be playing and going toe-to-toe with the Ducks team that I expect them, like I said, to be competing with throughout the year. So that's the type of game that they do need to ultimately be winning. However, being competitive is a start. Catching up and not being that lone man, that lone team in last place is a start. And really, I think they carried that level of play into Game 3 against the Stars. And by far, the Stars are a much higher quality opponent than either the Ducks or the Blues project to be or really were in that game. And really, the Sharks, it's a continuous progression. They went from not having many shots on goal to start the game to having pretty balance in that first period against the Ducks to in this game against Dallas, they took it to the Dallas team and had the first few shots on goal. They were really putting pressure on Ottinger and on that Dallas defense. And once again, Blackwood was having some strong goaltending to keep pace with Dallas. Really just all three phases of the game, just matching intensity with Dallas, very physical, not afraid to be going up against an undefeated team on the road, and really trying to take it to them. And ultimately, this did pay off for the Sharks. They were able to open the scoring with a goal from Tyler Toffoli in the second. As I said before, he has been a wonderful signing for the Sharks. But this is important to note is while that first period was strong, the second period was not. That goal from Toffoli was off of a turnover at the blue line by the Stars. He was able to take that man advantage and put it into the net as we expect a goal scorer of his quality to do. But the Stars did dominate possession and opportunities in the second period. And they did, when the Sharks scored, they did respond and score a goal within a few minutes. And when the Sharks had another opportunity and scored another goal a few minutes later off of yet another turnover, and I must say a very lucky bounce in favor of the Sharks going off the back of Ottinger for the goal. It was the Stars who dominated possession in that second period, who were more physical, who were forcing more of those turnovers. And I will say Blackwood did his best to hold the line and to be sturdy between the pipes, but the ice was certainly tilted in favor of the Stars in the second period. As I mentioned, that first period, the goal differential or the shots on goal differential was negligible. But by the end of the second period, the Stars had over 10 extra shots on goal compared to the Sharks. So they really did start to show that class, that experience from being a high quality playoff team where it's young talent, but it is more experienced young talent than what the Sharks have to offer. I do believe this is going to be a bit of the recipe for the Sharks, though, is knowing that it is still a work in progress. It is still a rebuild. Blackwood is going to need to continue to play lights out, and the Sharks are going to have to keep capitalizing on those turnovers. It's not a guarantee that you'll score a puck off a turnover, but when you have a 2-on-1 or a 1-on goalie where you are undefended, the Sharks do need to capitalize on those opportunities. They've scored only 6 goals on the season with those two in this game against the Stars coming off of those turnovers, off of those odd man rushes. So while it's not ideal, this is right now the formula for the Sharks. Their offense is not generating enough steam on its own when MacLeod is out of the lineup. So they have to capitalize when those opportunities do present themselves. And they have, in a sense, capitalized on those opportunities against the Stars, but unfortunately, at the same time, they are still winless. So the opportunities have been there for wins. That game against the Ducks was tied for the majority of it. It was a winnable game against another basement dweller. The game against the Blues, you're up 4-1 going into the third period. You should not be losing that game. That is a choke job. That should not be happening. A game against the Stars where you're competing and it is 2-2 and you force overtime because your goaltender is playing lights out, you need to get that puck in the net in overtime, or you can't miss that first shot attempt from the Sharks in OT was just a terrible attempt against a goalie as good as Ottinger. And so, yes, while Mackenzie Blackwood did not make a single save in that shootout, ultimately the Sharks need to be better on offense in those let's call it special teams opportunity. Nonetheless, they did survive overtime despite a late power play that they gave up, that they conceded to the Stars. So in a sense, that is improvement as compared to how they showed against the Blues. But it needs to keep getting better if they have any hope of actually moving up in the rankings in the Pacific Division.
Yes, and to keep my comments brief, because I think we're about out of time for today, I did get to watch this game, and if anything, the power play needs to improve, because if you can't convert on a 5-on-3 when you have 1 minute and 36 seconds, I think that is something to really take note of as a team in general, that the strategy clearly needs to change. Because even though the Stars have a fantastic penalty kill, that is of no mystery, you have a significant man advantage. And to me, I feel like you should always be converting no matter who you are on a 5-on-3, especially when you have that significant of an amount of time.
Yes, you are so correct. You could not be more right in this. When you have 2 extra men on the ice that can't be covered, there's so much extra space on the ice. When we see with 4-on-4s or in overtime with 3-on-3 how many more passing lanes there are, there's just more room to operate on the ice. But when you're 5-on-3 and you have extra positions that can move the puck, you need quicker tape-to-tape passing. You need to be having some motion and moving so that you force the defense to move and clear even more space. And when you have 2 extra players, why isn't one of them camping in front of the net, blocking the eyes of Jake Ottinger, making it difficult, trying to create a ricochet or a rebound opportunity? So yes, you're absolutely correct. 5-on-3 should always be converted when the opportunity is there. We do acknowledge that the Stars have an incredible penalty kill. That is true, like you said, but that's no excuse. When you have that opportunity, like I said, as a team in the Sharks where you have to capitalize on what limited opportunities you're going to have, you can't be coming up short.
And I think you're exactly right, Dom. Well, I was super glad to have you back for today. Can't wait for what's coming forward in the future, but I'm glad you could be here with me today.
Thanks for having me here as always. And yeah, I'm glad to be here again too. My apologies to the fans for rambling on a little bit longer there. I definitely think we went past our hour, but it's always a great time to chat hockey with you. I'm very happy to do it and to be back into that routine, and looking forward to our episode next week as well.
Absolutely. And to let everybody know, we're getting back on track, thankfully, barring any major events, which happen every week. So who knows at this point? But for now, our plan is to have the episodes released every Thursday morning for you to enjoy on your morning commute or whatever else you enjoy. Segment we did not get to today that we will immediately start with next time, because it's been on our docket for a while, is why you should watch the regular season. I think we're still early enough on to where this still holds a lot of relevance, but we will literally make it our very first segment right after we do the intro next time. So look forward to that. In terms of what's coming next time as well, obviously we'll have continued game analysis. I am literally going to run and go watch the Avalanche Bruins game right after we stop recording here. Hopefully with some improved results from the good guys here, as well as for the Sharks as well. Always hoping the best. Perhaps we'll have that goaltending analysis that I talked about the previous episode, but the more I've sat and thought about it, the more I've realized I want to dedicate quite a bit of time to it. So we'll see how that's going to go. So those are some things to look forward to next time. But what is your hockey fun fact for today? Well, since the Avalanche are going to be playing the Bruins tonight, I thought this fact was acceptable. And Dom, tell me if you've heard this one before. After the Bruins won the Stanley Cup in 2011, they celebrated at Shrine Nightclub at Foxwoods Casino in, let's see if I can pronounce this, Mashantucket, Connecticut. Here, they racked up a bill of, Dom, do you have any guesses for how large their bar tab was this night?
Oh my. How much does the Stanley Cup weigh? Do you know?
The Stanley Cup is about 32 pounds, I believe.
All right. Yeah, so let's go with 3,232. That's what we'll do for the tab. I have no idea, so we're going to just take a guess that seems like fit
I apologize. It's 34.5 pounds. It's 34.5 pounds or 15.6 kilograms for all of our outside the U.S. listeners. So 30.
Well, then we'll go with 3,450 then. That'll be the guess. It just seems fitting. It's also a large team. I expect a large tab, so watch me have way smaller number than what it actually is.
Here they racked up a bill of $156,679.74.
Oh my, yeah. Like I figured it was going to be bigger. I figured I needed to add another zero, but 2 zeros? Oh my. Well, you know, at least, I mean, what can you say? You said it was the Bruins, right?
Yes.
Well, if there's one thing I know having been there, Bostonians know how to drink. So cheers to you guys. Enjoy your Guinness out there.
All of this came from alcohol. Their biggest expense of the night was a rare 30-liter bottle of Armand de Brignac, I don't know, champagne called the Ace of Spades Midas bottle, which costs $100,000. That's how you celebrate your victories.
Oh, well, that explains it. I would have been at least a little bit closer if it weren't for that one bottle, but way to go. Congratulations to them to know how to celebrate like a champion, and I look forward to hearing how other teams celebrate perhaps in the future.
Well, according to the Avalanche, you drop and dent the Stanley Cup. So, go. All righty, everyone. Well, we greatly appreciate you taking the time to listen to this podcast. I'm Captain Avalanche Corey.
And this is Dom from the Tank.
And we really appreciate your time. Thank you, everyone. See you next time.